Sometimes the best stories in golf aren't found on tour. You'll find them at the back of the range. And here's your host, Ben Adelberg.
Thanks again for joining me here at the back of the range. I'm your host, Ben Adelberg. This is episode 44. If you listened to last week's episode or you've been following us on Instagram, you'll know that North Florida beat South Florida in the Florida Cup by 1 point. By one bleeping point. Despite the fact that my South Florida team lost, it was quite an experience, so congrats to Captain Mark Dull, Chip Brooks, Steve Carter. The rest of the North team, they benefited from the podcast mojo. Not exactly how we drew that up, but still an incredible 3 days of golf. By the way, the Florida Cup is presented by the Florida State Golf Association. It was held at the Creek Course at Hammock Dunes Club in Palm Coast, Florida. This place was absolutely amazing. The conditions were perfect, so a tip of the hat has to go to Brad Myers, the director of golf, Matt Howes, the superintendent, and our unofficial host, Bob Campione. As I said, we are on Instagram. We're there at the Back of the Range podcast. Don't forget, we're also on Facebook and Twitter. All the links that you need are in the show notes of the episode of this podcast. If you want to listen to previous episodes, you want to learn more about the podcast in general, go ahead and head over to thebackoftherange.com. As you all know, we like to give things away here at the Back of the Range, whether it be towels or hats or drink koozies. They all have our logo on them, and we want to give them out to our listeners. So leave a review in Apple Podcasts. Follow us on social media channels. Leave comments. We'll send you something for free. Just our little thank you for supporting the podcast. Now, I know that football is in full swing, and apparently basketball is as well, which is kind of strange. But, there's still some interesting things happening in the world of golf. Brooks Koepka is our new number one player in the world after winning the CJ Cup over in Korea. And, while Tiger, Phil, DJ, the rest of the stars of the PGA Tour get most of the attention, the tour is still full of amazing and talented players. Some of them jumped straight to the PGA Tour out of college, but many of them played on developmental tours before making it to the show. Players like Austin Cook, Bubba Watson, Tim Herron, Andrew Landry, Ryan Palmer, they played the mini tours. In fact, they all played one in particular, the APT Tour. And that brings us to this week's guest. Gary DeSerrano is the founder of the APT Tour, which conducts pro tournaments in Texas, Oklahoma, Missouri, and yes, Kansas. The APT partners with local nonprofits to conduct professional tournaments in the Mid-South region of the United States. And in addition to raising thousands of dollars each year for charity, these events provide an avenue for professional golfers to hone their skills while preparing for life on the PGA Tour. Oh, and this episode, this one's a little bit unique because we have a special guest that appears halfway through the episode. I'll leave it as a surprise for now, but I will say this. He did graduate from the APT Tour, and he is a PGA Tour winner. So, let's get started with this week's episode. Gary, thanks so much for joining us here at the Back of the Range. So, I guess the first question I have for you is, how did you get started running a developmental golf tour?
Well, first of all, thanks for having us on. And then, it was an interesting path. I began in the media business years ago and was very successful in sports marketing and selling sponsorships on radio and TV. And it happened to be that my youngest brother, Scott, was at Oklahoma State and doing very, very well. And in 91 was fortunate enough to win a national championship with the team. And then, like many of these pros, turned pro. And we put a sponsor group together. He went to Asia, South Africa, several places all over the world, and then ended up getting his Nike Tour card in 92. But when he failed to get his card again in 93, and we were looking for other places to play, we just felt like a couple of friends of mine said, why isn't there more opportunity for the young guys in the United States? Sure. And that's when we decided to branch off from the media business and look at running golf tournaments.
When you when you call a golf course, now obviously you're incredibly well developed and well established with sponsors and charity involvement, with which we're going to get into a little bit later. But when you first start and you call up some of these golf courses or country clubs, what's your sales pitch and what's their reaction?
Well, it's evolved over the years, no
Sure.
doubt, but it's interesting because when we call, we basically say we would like to bring a professional golf tournament to their course. Would they be interested? And the first thing they want to know is this a Monday or a Tuesday outing? And I
Right.
would say, no, this is a week-long event, just like a PGA Tour event. So that certainly closes the door to a lot of opportunities for us. But then there are several, there's enough golf around that most of them are looking for or know a young man that is on his way to the PGA Tour, and they get the process and they're interested in learning more about what we do.
And you're getting, like you said, you're getting these college studs. You're getting maybe guys that were, bouncing around the professional ranks, and they're looking for a good place to play. What does a typical week look like for you right now? You're next week, in 2 weeks, you're going to be at the Texarkana Open, August 15th to the 18th. What does your operation look like now? What does a typical week entail?
Well, I mean, if you look at a general PGA or a web.com tour event, we're very, very similar, with the exception of we finish on a Saturday. But really, Mondays are practice rounds, special events. We've arrived a day earlier to begin setting up. Tuesdays are Pro-Am days. Some are larger than others, but usually we have a double wave of Pro-Am, just like a PGA event. And then our first round of the golf tournament begins on Wednesday. And just like a PGA event, we have morning tee times, afternoon tee times. Wednesday and Thursday, the first two rounds, we make a cut. And then Friday and Saturday are the final two rounds, just like you would see on TV. And the reason we finish on Saturday is most of these young guys like to go to Monday qualifiers.
Sure.
And it provides them an opportunity to do some travel on Saturday, practice rounds on Sunday, and then try their Monday qualifier.
And, for most people that follow golf, they know that there are several players that have made it through the mini tours or developmental tours, get to the web, they get to the PGA Tour. And we hear all about their war stories, whether it's the, driving 9 hours and, sleeping in their car. We know about what the player's perspective is, but what about you? What have been some of the biggest challenges, or maybe just, weeks or situations that you've come across that most people wouldn't think of when they think of these tours? You're coming at it from the completely different angle from a player. What have been some of your challenges over the years?
Well, I mean, there's several challenges, and the biggest is scheduling. Is what is going to optimize the field strength and the field for our local groups that are helping us run these tournaments. And what we found over the last few years is that the closer we are to a Monday qualifier, the closer we are to a Monday web.com qualifier, it really helps amplify the strength of the field and the size of the field. So, with that being said, it's not easy to work with the local communities because sponsors have certain time frames that they want to run events. Courses have certain time frames, and yet the PGA Tour has their own schedule. So getting those all coordinated seems to be the biggest challenge every year. And the PGA Tour, while it stays pretty static, the web.com tour changes quite a bit week to week. So, each year we wait for the web.com schedule to come out, and then we try to put these entities together and see if they all meld.
I've been doing a little bit of research and kind of looking at winning scores and looking at the numbers that your guys are shooting. Like, for example, you just had last week, you have the Bogey Hills Invitational in St. Charles, Missouri. And I just pulled up, obviously the name Scotty Scheffler just jumps right out, played at Texas. He's a former U.S. junior amateur champion, All-American. And he goes out and he's 15 under for 4 rounds. The worst round he shoots is 69. Can you speak to just how good the players are on your tour and how close they are to breaking through?
Scotty's a quality golfer, and we're happy to have him out, especially since he just turned pro. And he played very well, and he still lost by 7 shots to the 2 gentlemen that tied and were in a playoff. It's really amazing on how many young guys that are not on tour that are of a caliber that everybody would think would be there and be on the PGA Tour. Ben Burns Sam Burns last year turned professional. His first tournament was actually our event in Brownwood. He shot 29 under and he lost by one shot to a young man out of Arkansas. So good golf is everywhere. It's just a matter of whether these guys can find their way or get a little bit of luck to get through qualifying school and get onto the PGA Tour. We've got Walker Cup players like Scotty, and then we've got guys like BJ Staten who've been on and off the PGA and the web.com over the last, 10, 15 years. So when you put all of that together, I mean, the fields are tremendously strong, and it's just a matter of time before we see the guys move on to the next level.
And I guess, you've been around this for many years. You've seen I can't imagine how many guys you've seen come through in and out, either stay for a couple of years or you never hear from them again. But I know this is kind of hard to pinpoint, but is there one characteristic other than the play? Because it sounds like there's just a truckload of guys that can just go low every single week. But is there a characteristic that maybe you see from tour stop to tour stop, they're like, wow, that guy's kind of got something that some of the other guys don't?
Well, it's interesting. I'm asked every year by Callaway and Titleist and several of these manufacturers who we think might be the next guy. And it almost seems like we're 50-50 on whether we pick a guy making it or not. TrackMan was just recently out of our last tournament, and they were doing club head speed and ball speed analysis of the players on our tour. And every time I would talk to them, they would say, listen, these are on the top 10%, 15% on the PGA Tour as far as numbers. So ball striking for the guys is really not a lot different between our top players and guys that are on tour. I think the biggest difference is the putting and the wedge game. The pros at this level, I think what's holding them back a little bit is that area of golf. And when you see the pros on the PGA Tour getting it up and down from 100 yards 50% of the time, 60% of the time, I think that's where the difference lies with these younger guys and the guys that are on the tour.
Like you said, it's just such a fine line. You just mentioned Sam Burns. I mean, you said last year he starts as a professional, and he played with Tiger at the Honda Classic this year. And you're seeing that just this fine line of how these guys make and how they don't. You've been in this situation where you see some of these guys year in, year out. Have there been times where you've kind of wanted to put your arm around a guy and say, hey, maybe this isn't for you?
Well, we do that a lot.
Okay.
And we do it mainly with parents and the players themselves. I mean, we basically will talk to them and say, listen, here's the performance you've been putting up, and here's what it takes to make a cut. And it's a very expensive proposition.
Yeah.
Not being on the PGA Tour. So we're a family-owned business, and I've had a younger brother that's gone through the process. So I have a little more empathy than maybe some other folks are out there that are in the business, that we understand it's expensive, and sometimes you just need to have a reality check with the player and say, listen, I think there's other ways for you to see if you can prepare yourself, and if things go better, then come back out here and test the waters again.
Wow.
But we've had a lot of players that I'd have to say weren't quite talented enough, had plenty of money, but it weren't quite talented enough, and just never really ever made a cut or made any money.
It's a true testament to the organization, the business that you're running, because at the end of the day, you are running a business. You need to make money to take care of your family. And I was just kind of curious, how do you keep the distance emotionally when your heart goes out to these guys who are trying to chase a dream, but you may be the one that has to sit them down or explain that to them. So transitioning from that, give me an idea, or can you think of a guy that you just thought was absolutely going to make it, at least move out of your tour to either the Nike or Web or whatever it's been called through the years? But is there a guy or a handful of guys that you can think of off the top of your head that you really thought were going to make it and just didn't?
Well, I mean, there's been many years when I was thinking that this young guy is a sure thing and certainly should make it. I've seen kids that came out of big schools, whether it was Oklahoma State, Texas, Waco's pumping out a large number of good players right now. Pepperdine, Northwestern, and you'd look at their college resume and you go, there's absolutely no way he can't make it to the next level. And they just don't seem to find a way. And what we found is that a lot of times it always came easy for them. And then when they get to this level and they play with young guys that are either younger than them or older than them, but are very, very good players, sometimes it's a little bit of a shock to their system that they've never heard of these people, and all of a sudden they're being beat by them. So sometimes it's mentally a little bit of a challenge, and it's tough for them to get over.
Yeah. And then I guess conversely, obviously, can you think of a guy that maybe you just didn't see a whole lot out of when they're on your tour, and now you're like, wow, that guy's on the web, or wow, that guy made it to the PGA Tour, that just maybe that surprised you?
I would say Andrew Landry was a very good player here. He won once. He finally won after a few years, and there has been many a times that I had heard him and his mother talking about how much longer he was going to try and whether he could do it. And, all of a sudden it just clicked. He made it to the web, won a few web events, and now he's done very, very well on the PGA Tour. Austin Cook played here. Austin is a winner on the PGA Tour. He didn't win here, but he was a solid player, and we knew he was a good player, but you just don't know if that's going to be transposed to the next level, and obviously it has.
Yeah.
And then Brice Garnett, who hopefully we'll talk to a little bit later today, same situation, came out of Missouri, small school, and played pretty well at first, and then all of a sudden it just started to click for him, and he got better every single time we saw him. He won in Baton Rouge, and then moved on up to the web, and now the PGA Tour is a winner. So we've seen a lot of good young men learn how to be a professional, and that's really what we're all about, is hopefully developing them from college to the professional level so that they're successful.
You're not just sending guys out to go play 3 rounds of golf and that's it. Sounds like you're putting together a complete tour experience, whether it's pro-ams, whether it's the practice rounds, especially getting involved with charities. What's been one of the most rewarding, one of your tour stops that maybe wasn't on your radar, or something that's really flourished over the last several years where you've really gotten in close with the community? They can't wait for you to come back every year. I know it's going to be hard to pick just one, but can you give an example of one of those communities that you've really touched as far as one of their local charities?
Well, I mean, the charities do change a little bit in each market. Sometimes the boards change, but I'd have to say the community that really looks forward to us coming back, and there's a lot of them, but the one that really has been impactful was Houma, Louisiana. It's a small city southwest of New Orleans. And, the claim to fame for that tournament was Bubba Watson played there in 2005. And here was this left-handed kid that hit it from forever, and nobody knew who he was, and came out, shot a course record after 2 rounds, blew away the tournament record, won by 5 or 6 shots. And since that point, this community has said, this is why we want to do this, is because we want to help these young guys make it. Now, Bubba went on to be one of the best players on the PGA Tour, winning a few Masters. But at the same time, at that time, nobody knew that was going to happen.
Yeah.
But when you see a young guy come out and excel and then go on to the next level and do very well, that's when it really excites our local communities.
That's great. Yeah, you've had, gosh, just by looking on your website and seeing the bio that you've provided, and I will definitely put a link to your website on in the show notes of this podcast. Mark Hensby and Tim Herron. Oh, please tell me you have a good Tim Herron story. Please tell me you have a good Tim Herron story.
Lumpy was here a long time ago.
Lumpy.
So he liked to drink a little bit, played a lot of golf. But I will say this, he was probably one of the most naturally talented guys, probably until Bubba came out. Didn't come out. He wasn't a physically fit guy compared to a lot of these young guys. And
he is a specimen. He is a physical specimen now.
He is. And he's one of the funnier guys that's come out of here. There's no doubt about it. He definitely had a sense of humor, a little bit of a prankster every once in a while, but he definitely had a lot of fun and was a good golfer, won several times.
Sure. I could just, like, if I was setting the tee sheet, I would put every young gun hotshot coming in for their first time playing a professional tour event. I would put them at Tim Herron and just sit back and laugh and laugh and laugh and watch this guy just take them to school. but that's probably why you run your tour and I don't run it. So, but yeah, I mean, you got Cameron Beckman, Ryan Palmer, solid guy out of Texas. And then, I mean, these are just names, Sean Stephanie played there, and you just have a great track record of graduating these players. And it's a fascinating business model. Like you really don't want, or correct me if I'm wrong, but you really don't want guys hanging out on your tour for years and years and years, do you? You want to get them in and get them out.
Well, we do. And, one of the favorite things I love to say to these young guys, especially when they go Monday qualify and we always recognize them when they do, is I hope not to see you anymore.
Yeah.
And we say that in a loving way, that we wish them luck. We want them to move on, and we want them to remember their time here, but remember that they don't want to be here.
Sure, exactly. So you make it comfortable, you make it as convenient as possible. You try and build them up, but ultimately you want to get them out of there.
We do. And, we've had some young guys that it started to click. And, last year, one of Jordan Spieth's roommates, Kramer Hickok, was struggling, asked Jordan for some advice, and it seemed to work. And he won an event of ours in May in Baton Rouge, went on and had qualified for Canada, won 2 events in Canada, and now he's on the web.com, and he's near the top 25 to get his PGA card the next year. So you just never know how quickly it's going to happen for a young guy. And I remember Kramer was struggling before that. So it wasn't like he was out here winning a lot. It was just he was struggling, got some advice, it happened, and then he's moved on. And every time I see him, I say, I hope not to see anymore. Yeah. And he giggles and laughs when we do say that.
Yeah. It sounds like that's the common theme. That's great. So I know you're going to be a proud papa of these guys, and you're going to be a little bit biased, but if I took the top 25, or let's see, if I put maybe like the top 12 guys on your tour right now against maybe the top 12 guys on the web.com tour, and sent them out and did a Ryder Cup match, how close is that going to be?
I'm going to say it's going to be pretty close.
And I'm just asking it to illustrate to the people listening that, they may have the mindset of what a mini tour is, but these guys are truly, they're right there, aren't they?
Well, they are. I mean, the guy that's number 2 on our money list had a full status on the web.com for 3 years. So Daniel's since lost his card, and now he's trying to earn it back, and he's doing very well this year. So Daniel's been out there. Josh Creel's won several times, and he's been on and off the web.com, and he's played, I think he played around 8 events last year. So the difference is not going to be a lot. Now, I will say, the guys at the top of the web.com are studs. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. That's why they're going to be on the PGA Tour. So I'd have to say in a match play situation, it'd be pretty close, but, I'm certain that the web guys would probably come out on top. Maybe let's call it 6-5.
Now, I know a tour of your size can sometimes be referred to as a mini tour, but you prefer to label it and promote it and treat it as a developmental tour. Can you think of an example of not just players that graduate and move on, but an example of how they develop while they're on your tour and how they grow as professionals?
Well, one of the things that really struck home for me this last week was, we are a developmental tour, and what you want is these young guys learning from their experiences. And one of the things that was really rewarding last week at the Bogey Hills tournament was Michael Martinson, who had been leading since, I believe, the second round, and playing outstanding. I mean, the members were commenting on how perfect he was playing. There was just no mistakes. He came down to the last 2 holes, and Charlie Holland was playing well himself on the last day and putting pressure on him. And Michael bogeyed the 17th, and then he hit his drive too far into a waterfall on the 18th. Recovered with a bogey, but had to go into a playoff. And you could see the tremendous disappointment on his face after he putted out on the 72nd hole. Yet he was able to gather himself, go to the 18th again, hit the proper shot off the tee, hit a perfect second shot just below the hole, and make a birdie to win in the first hole of the playoff. And I asked him afterwards, I said, you were playing so well, and then the last 2 holes you had this adversity where you all of a sudden it just kind of fell apart, and you allowed somebody to tie you and go into a playoff. I said, so how did you feel after you were able to birdie the last hole? And he said, it was just so rewarding to know that I had gone through, 2 tough holes, allowed myself to let the tournament get away from me, and then yet hit a good shot and make a putt to win the tournament. And he says, that's all you can ask for in golf, is to try to have that opportunity. So, teaching these young guys to deal with adversity and then turn it around and make a positive out of it, where you could see a lot of young guys it goes the opposite way. They get into the playoff and then they bogey the hole and then they lose the tournament. And
Sure.
it doesn't go well. So that just to me was a great illustration of what this tour is all about, is teaching them how to take adversity and turn it into a positive.
You're preparing these guys for playing at the next level. But one of the things it looks like you're also doing is you're getting them used to, like you said, adversity right there, and also maybe talking to the media, where you're asking them to recount and talk about their experiences. Other than the playing, is that something that you're actively trying to do as well, where you're trying to teach them how to be a professional and not just shooting scores?
Well, yes, absolutely. And a lot of it comes from college, and some of the kids that come from the large colleges, they
got it.
They've been asked questions by the media before, and especially a Scotty Scheffler, who's been, in the Walker Cup. There's a big media coverage there. But for the most part, I mean, if you look at top to bottom, the players that are out here, a lot of them have not had a lot of opportunity to visit with media. And one of the biggest educations is you're leading a tournament and you don't play great, and yet still the media wants to talk to you afterwards and say, tell us about your round and how you struggled today. You see it all the time on the PGA Tour, and parents of these young guys just hope that when the microphone is put in their face that they say the right things. And that's really another education piece for them, is dealing with the media, dealing with sponsors, dealing with pro-am questions. It really helps them prepare for when they don't play well or play well on the PGA Tour and they get that question.
Yeah. And how do you help them? How do you get attention to your players? Because you're running this great organization, and do you do player features? Or do you do things that kind of maybe the community locally can kind of get behind one of the guys, and they can learn how to follow them online, or they can get some personal bio information? How do you help cultivate your cast of characters, so to speak?
Well, that's one of the difficult things, is when we do visit with a community, they always want to know if we have any recognizable names. And the tough thing is, unless they're from that area, it's going to be tough to know. Sometimes when you're playing in Oklahoma and you have an Oklahoma State or Oklahoma grad, it's easier. But the thing I always tell them is, listen, most of the kids on this tour, and I call them kids, they're quite a bit younger than me. Most of these young guys have a very nice resume from college golf, and they wouldn't be out here trying to play professional golf and get to the PGA Tour unless they had talent. So, and then the other thing is I just go over the scores that they've been shooting and say, we've got a Josh Creel who has played 2 tournaments in a row and won at 26 under and won at 22 under. And they all of a sudden go, oh, wow, these guys can play. This is not just a so-called mini tour. This is a group of young guys that are probably on their way to the next level. So once the scores is, and the track record for us has helped too. I mean, when you get the names of guys that have graduated, it certainly helps us get the conversation started about what we can do in their community.
Sure. Well, Gary, you mentioned that, you mentioned a lot of these great names that have moved on from your tour to higher ranks, Webb and PGA. You mentioned Andrew Landry, you mentioned Austin Cook, and you alluded to Brice Garnett that might be joining us. And, well, this is a first time for us. We have 2 people on the line. So Brice Garnett, PGA Tour winner, welcome to the back of the range.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to talking about some golf.
Yeah, I was kind of, when I was preparing for today and to discuss the APT with both of you, I'm thinking to myself, this is kind of like bringing you back for your 10-year high school reunion back to the APT to just remember some old war stories. I know you have a lot of web events and a lot of a PGA Tour victory to your credit, but You're also the 2010 Mary Bird Perkins Open champion. Does that ring a bell at all?
Oh yeah. I'll never forget that week. I believe the golf course was Santa Maria there.
Yes, it was
in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I felt like it was a week that it had, been coming for a couple, 3 years, and I could never close the door. And, it got off to a good start that week. I remember a couple 67s, I believe, and then just my time to punch the ticket, and it was fun. Week I'll never forget. Actually, my first professional win ever. So
wow, yeah. So you went to Missouri Western State. You're a 3-time D2 All-American. When you were deciding to turn pro, what was it that really attracted you to the Adams Pro Tour? Because I know you played there I know you play a little bit off and on, but it looks like you had several full seasons. But what attracted you to that tour immediately?
Yeah, I didn't even know anything about professional golf when I was in college, to be honest. I knew there was, the PGA Tour, of course. I was somewhat familiar with the Nationwide Tour at the time. And then I had no understanding of, the lower ranking tours across the country. And I think it was about maybe my senior year around Christmas break. My dad, had mentioned to me about playing golf after college, and, why not?
Sure.
I love the sport, and to go compete more, my competing days wouldn't be done, and I wasn't ready to do anything in a bank with my finance degree. So luckily, I had 10, 15 guys around Northwest Missouri put some money behind me, and we kind of weighed out our options. And I think at the time it was kind of between the Adams and the Hooters Tour. The Adams was a little bit closer to home. It was a little bit easier for me to drive to events. I can't remember the entry fees might have been a little bit cheaper. I knew the competition was still great, and we decided to go there, and really happy I did. I mean, I wouldn't change anything for the world now.
Well, and for those that want to get to the level that you're at on the PGA Tour, there's a lot of people listening that are either collegiate players or they're looking to make that move. You obviously have to shoot the scores to move up the ranks, but what were some of the things that you learned while you were on the APT to become a professional? I know, everyone has to shoot in the 60s and you got to win, but what were the traits that you picked up to turn this into your livelihood and your career?
Well, I think, in high school, I had a good high school and junior career, but once I got to college, I was able to spend more time and focus on my game. And then even that after college, once you turn professional, you just get that extra time and that focus into, what you're trying to achieve. And I remember my dad telling me when I first started, he said, look, you're not going to be the best player out there. You're going to get beat up pretty good, but, don't let anybody outwork you. Try to get better every day and just stay patient with it. And, I don't think there's any time frame for professional golfers coming out of college. Some guys jump on the tour that are phenoms, and then, sometimes you gotta work your way up through the rankings. And, just through the Adams Tour, it just taught me about being patient, taught me how to persevere through tougher times. Many tour guys, I think, have some of the best stories in professional golf that don't get told. As far as cashing a paycheck to,
sure,
play the following week or fill their car up with gas or, whatever it might be. There's a lot of perseverance there for a lot of guys, and a lot of patience as well. So, just taught me a lot about digging deep and finding out if I truly love the game. And I think the Adams Tour is probably where I deeply fell in love with the grind of professional golf.
Wow, that's a pretty big statement right there. Because if you're loving it on a developmental tour, then you must really love this. And from what you're saying, it wasn't your first thought coming out of college. So, I just jotted this down last night. I was thinking to myself that where your professional career started and where it has gone, Gary. So I gotta ask Brice this. Brice, what was the worst hotel situation you ever had when you were playing the development tours compared to the best hotel situation you've had on the PGA Tour?
Well, always joke and tell people that, the mini tours and Adams Tour days were the most fun I've had traveling. Just because of the camaraderie, everybody's there, trying to achieve the same thing. You're bunking up 3 to a room. You're never eating a meal alone. You're always, with your buddies or fellow competitors. And just kind of as you move up through the ranks, that camaraderie just kind of goes down. More families start to travel, more coaches, more entourages. But I remember we were in, I think it was maybe Delhi, Louisiana. The golf course was Black Bear, maybe. Great golf course, not much in the city. Of course, staying with my counterparts, Brett Callis and Ryan Botcha and Robert Gwynn, those guys. And we were at this hotel that was it was literally a roach infested hotel. We would walk outside and you could just hear, you were just stepping on roaches. It was just a constant crunching noise of roaches. And, we laugh about it. It's something that none of us will forget. And, you stay at some nice resorts on tour and quickly reminds you of why you work so hard throughout the years getting to where you want to get.
Sure. What was the most fun celebration after an Adams Pro Tour victory? Compare that to maybe what did you do after you won the Perkins Open? What did you do after you won the I believe it's the Corral? Yeah. What did you do after won the Corrales Punta Cana Resort?
Both entailed some adult beverages out of the trophy.
Attaboy.
So, I remember the following week after the Baton Rouge win, we were in Hohen, Louisiana. I would stay with the tournament director and a good friend, Brett Cuneo. And we would set out on his back patio, and he did a crawfish boil and poured a 6-pack of beer in the trophy, and we each kind of passed it around. And honestly, that's what I did with the bigger crystal trophy that I won. We put a drink in there and was back home with my buddies in Northwest Missouri, and we passed it around and just had a big time because you're not in this professional golf thing alone, and so many people are behind you and make sacrifices for you to get where you want to get. You just want to enjoy those sweet moments and memories with them as well.
Sure. I mentioned to Gary earlier, and Gary really spoke highly of the caliber of play on the developmental tours. I just recently looked, and Tyler McCumber won 25 under in PGA Tour Canada last week, and actually Martin Traynor did the same thing on the web. 25 under was the winning score. Just how good are these developmental tours and the players on those tours? What is the fine line to reach the PGA Tour for people that are listening that don't know who's on some of these tours? I mean, you graduated from there. You've been there. You've reached the PGA Tour. How fine is the line?
It's nuts. It's the scores that are being shot across all levels of professional golf it's mind blowing. I still have a lot of friends on the Adams and Webb, and so I keep in touch with the scores. And I'll tell a quick story. I remember my first event as a professional in Lake Charles, Louisiana. I'd had a good college career. I'd won 12 times and shoot 71 the first day, 1 under, thinking, all right, not a bad start to my professional career.
Sure.
I get done and look at the scoreboard, and there's a 61, 2, and 3. And so I'm 10 shots back already. And I remember, calling Dad and saying, man, I don't know if I'm cut out for this. These guys are a lot better than I am, or a lot better than I thought that they would be. And so it's just weird, guys do it so many different ways. And you see on the PGA Tour, different swings. You see perfect swings. You see homemade swings. So it just comes down to just getting a break, catching a break, and playing good golf at the right time. And, for me, I got extremely lucky when I got on the web.com tour, wasn't ready for it, played poorly, was kind of kicked back to the mini tours. And I had a really good run of Monday qualifying in 2011. I was traveling home. My dad had said, hey, why don't you give it one more try? It's an $80 flight to Nashville. You can go try to Monday qualify in Chattanooga. And at this time, I was really exhausted. I was tired. I was going to focus on Q school. But I thought for $80, why not?
Sure.
Went to Chattanooga, Monday qualified again, and ended up finishing second for the week. And that was enough money to go ahead and give me, my full status for the following year in 2012. So, it's things like that. It's just catching a break or, making a putt at the right time, and then just kind of parlaying that into the full year.
You mentioned, I just picked up something you just mentioned there. You said you went to the web, you weren't ready. In what way were you not ready? And maybe this is not so much with you, but just in general, when you see these guys go up one step, then maybe back one, then back up again. What's the thing that you're not finding, or you found that you weren't able to compete against these guys on the web? Was it the play? Was it just the travel? Can you pinpoint anything that maybe?
Yeah, so I think I wasn't mature. I wasn't mature enough in my golfing sense as far as course management.
Sure.
Understanding different situations, and the travel did take a different toll on my body. I wasn't used to as much travel as I was on the Adams. At that time, I was playing maybe 2 or 3 weeks in a row, and then having a week or two off. So the travel was definitely different. But I think my mindset, I'm not sure. And then, I wasn't mature enough with my course management and understanding, it's a process, and it's a year-long process, or it's a lifelong process for that matter, of just trying to get better, and just put yourself in the position to have a chance to win. And that first year on the web.com tour, I wasn't ready. And, I think I learned a lot and, helped prepare me for, the situation I'm in right now.
Sure. No, that's great. Gary, I was going to ask a question. I'm not sure if Brice, you want to hang on here just to kind of listen to it, but the quick question I was going to ask was, you mentioned what Brice just mentioned about trying to be prepared for that next level and get used to course management. I know you're limited on the courses that you get for your tournaments, but do you think about course setup and how to make that course just as tough as possible, not just to prepare them for that tournament, but also to prepare them for down the line?
Well, we do. And we've done a better job over the last probably 10 years in picking golf courses that are not necessarily the same. We play golf courses that are 7,500 yards where you can smash it. And then we play some golf courses that are 6,800 that are tight. You got to move the ball left and right. So we've done a very good job of changing things up. And I think what you see when you see the different winners out here on tour now is you see different types of players winning because their game suits certain golf course. But most of the people on our staff have been either players or have been around professional golf as a caddy, and it generally helps us understand what is really needed, and hopefully we can set up golf courses to challenge the guys and get them ready for the next level. Obviously, the golf course conditions for us are a little bit different than the PGA Tour and the web.com because we kind of have to deal with what we have when we get there, but we have such facilities now that most of the time we're at pretty good conditions.
I wanted to, Brice, give you the opportunity before I ask Gary this question, but Brice, can you give me a good Gary DeSerrano story from the Adams Pro Tour? And I'm going to have him see if he can give me a good Brice Garnett story.
Oh, man. I always tell people, when they ask me about places to play or where I started, and I always, I revert back to, 2007 maybe. The Adams Tour had been bought out by another tour. And I remember signing up and playing a couple of events, and then that tour going under. And then Gary started back the Adams Tour, and he would try to guarantee money at the beginning of the year. And it just sometimes the numbers didn't add up, or they don't add up. And one thing about the Adams Tour and Gary DeSerrano is that checks were always mailed out, or they always cashed. So he's just such a stand-up guy, and even if he couldn't guarantee the money, we still had the events. Might have played for a little bit less money, but we were still getting paid. I think for mini tour golf, that is a huge aspect.
Yeah.
And when you play the Adams Tour, you know what you're going to get. You're going to get good golf course, a great staff, and you're going to get a paycheck at the end of the week. And, there's not much more you can ask for in developmental golf.
No, that's very well said. Now, Gary, don't let Brice distract you from telling a marginally embarrassing story about his early years. Don't fall for that. So if you got a good one about him, maybe missing a tee time or sleeping in or getting lost on the way to the golf course, feel free to drop that one. It's fine. So don't get distracted.
Well, I mean, I don't have any of those funny stories about Brice because he was pretty professional when he played. But I will say this: one of the things is, especially when the young guys come out of college, is they don't seem comfortable around sponsors or at parties or the other things that go along with being a professional golfer. It's easy to play golf, right? I mean, you just tee it up, you go hit it and find it, and hopefully you have the lowest score. But one thing that Brice always got was he understood that there was more to tournaments and to what went on than just the playing golf itself. He understood the relationship with a pro-am team, with maybe getting to know the sponsors or the tournament directors and thanking them. So he was really good about that. And, he mentioned stories about some of these people he have known, like Brett Cuneo down in Homa. I mean, these are lifelong friends that he's got and that we all have from putting on these tournaments. And Brice was one of the guys that every time we were asked, who do you hope makes it? Who you think's going to make it? He was one of the guys that we always said, he's going to make it. And he's one of the best guys in the world. And it's evident coming on and doing this and some of the other things that we've asked of him and Ryan Palmer and a few other guys that have just been great guys. Some of the guys that did make it, we've got some great stories about, but we'll keep those for another time.
Done. Absolutely.
There's probably too many other stories for him to remember. That's,
Oh yeah. Well, Gary's being a little too nice because I told him like, hey, this isn't live. I'm going to edit stuff out. And I'm trying to get him to give me, some dirt. I don't even want a name. Actually, I don't need a name. Can you think of Brice just like a story about someone that you're just shaking your head like, man, this guy's just never like, I mean, I definitely don't want a name. I don't want to out anyone, but mini tour stories are always good.
Yeah, I remember. I think it was Texarkana, Arkansas, or Texas. I don't know which one it is, but
it's not Delaware.
I think we had a player meeting there one time, and it might have been a player meeting where Gary got everybody together and said, "Look, I can't keep guaranteeing these purses. If we want to keep playing, we're going to have to lower the purse amount." And I remember a guy, I think he was an Australian guy, shows up to the meeting or whatever, and he had about a bottle of whiskey, no lie. I mean, he was gone, about as drunk as I've seen anybody. And he comes in there raising hell and running his mouth, and I think he ended up in the jail cell that night. But
oh, nice.
Yeah, the mini tour days, those are the times you can laugh about now.
Sure.
Well, I'm going to elaborate on that because I do remember that.
Oh, okay.
I'm not going to mention the guy's name, but it was a tough meeting for the tour because we were struggling at the time, and a lot of guys like Brice and other folks that the players that understood the game were understanding, and this young guy he drank quite a bit, and he did get thrown in jail that night. He was drinking all day with a group he was staying with, private housing. Yet we did have a tournament the next day, and Brice, I don't know if you remember this, but that same player, while he was very sick on the golf course, I'm going to say every other third tee he would put a peg in the ground and he wouldn't keep his breakfast down. And yet he still shot 66 that day.
I do remember
somehow. Great player, fiery young guy, and boisterous, but that's one of them.
That's
the only other one that I can think of is that Ryan Palmer is not a very good karaoke singer. He tried to do his best in Tupelo, Mississippi one time, and it just it was very funny. but I'm going to say he's got a better career on the PGA Tour than he did at singing.
Okay, so he is not going to be on The Voice. He's just going to be on the PGA Tour. Well, there's worse things to say about Ryan Palmer. So,
Absolutely.
Well, Brice, I know that you have to take off. I do appreciate the time. Maybe next year we can have you on for a full episode here at the Back of the Range. In the meantime, best of luck the rest of the season. And again, thanks for coming on the Back of the Range.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I enjoyed it, and I'll definitely catch up with you next year if you want to. And good to chat with you, Gary.
Gary, I can't thank you enough for getting Brice Garnett here on for this episode. Man, he really is as advertised, as you said.
Absolutely. Yeah, he is one of the good dudes. He was very good to sponsors, and I will tell you this, my wife and I, this is really why it's real rewarding for us, is that, you get these young guys that are great guys, and my wife and I were vacationing in Palm Springs, and it was right before the PGA event was playing at PGA West. And I'm in the golf cart. We're about to go play just a fun round with my wife. And I was like, I recognize that guy over there. And looking, and then all of a sudden, I said, that's Brice.
Yeah.
Walk over there, and then what do? It's Brice Garnett and his caddy, Chris Callis, whose brother played out here for many, many years and never made it. Great guy. And Brice was in the process of practicing, getting ready, and playing a practice round before he went over to Hawaii. And he said, and he spoke to my wife and I for probably 30 minutes. And that's one of the reasons that we do this, is that the good guys move on. But he's so generous with his time. I mean, he didn't have to stand around and talk to us for that long.
No.
But he did. And it was really refreshing to hear how he was doing and how excited he was about the season. And,
Well, Gary, I really do appreciate the time. Thanks so much for joining us here at the Back of the Range Golf Podcast. Special thanks to getting Brice Garnett on for this episode. That was a very, very cool and unexpected treat. We will definitely put the links to the APT Tour in the show notes of this podcast. We will speak about it more often because clearly the stars of the PGA Tour are coming out of these developmental tours, and none more so than the APT Tour. So I greatly appreciate the time.
Ben, thanks so much for the time. I look forward to listening.
And there you have it, another great episode here at the Back of the Range. Special thanks to Gary DeSerrano, the founder of the APT Tour, and our special guest, Brice Garnett. He is a graduate of the APT Tour, playing on the PGA Tour, so look out for him. We'll see you again next week for another episode here at the Back of the Range.